Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are on this fast forward planet. Sadly, still wrapped in a pandemic. Several of our guests have had to deal with COVID-19, the Omicron ubiquitous variant, just in the recent days in Indigenous communities in the Arctic. And we're dealing with it, of course, in the rest of the world. I'm Andy Revkin, Columbia Climate School and Earth Institute, speaking to you today from Penobscot territory in northeastern Maine, where I'm with my mother-in-law who's had surgery recently, not my usual place. It's very cold here, although not as cold as it is in Kotzebue, from what our friends in Kotzebue are saying. And today, our Sustained Wet episode is a very special launch of a documentary, Ice Edge, the Ikaaġvik Sikukun story, which is about a pioneering research project, which from the very beginning was a partnership between very different kinds of communities of expertise and communities facing dramatic change and urgent needs. It's the Indigenous elders and leaders and environmental experts from the Iñupiaq community, the Native Village of Kotzebue in Alaska, and Columbia University and the Climate School, and University of Alaska, the International Arctic Research Center, came together to explore dramatic changes in the ice along the coasts, in the Chukchi area, the western part of the Alaskan Arctic. And this project wouldn't have happened without a very unusual grant from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, which was not like most grants in science where there's sort of some outcome. We need you to clarify how much global warming is changing sea ice. In this case, it was a grant really to build this relationship, to foster co-production, and also to foster communication. Part of the grant went to another unusual project. It was a film produced throughout the course of this enterprise. Normally, science like this is carried out, you get a paper published, and the paper gets into a journal, a press release goes out, and journalists write about it or don't. In this case, a very interesting filmmaker, Sarah Betcher from Alaska, who's worked a lot with Indigenous communities and storytelling and story sharing, was essentially embedded in the process, and you'll learn about that as well in the minutes ahead. This is a really great collection of people from across the country, and we're going to get going in a second. Just checking my notes here. I'd like to start to get the slides going. So here's this sort of shows you the flow. We have had the work underway for a couple of years, involving everything from, again, traditional expertise, Western, the deep native expertise in how sea ice behaves and the like, and things like drones and computer simulations all came together with papers emerging in the literature just in recent months. As I said to you earlier, I'm in Penobscot territory, now called the state of Maine, on the northeast part of North America. Columbia University occupies land that was Lenape land before Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory at the Columbia campus came to these areas. And we like to honor and acknowledge that the landscapes all around us, wherever we are, wherever you are, someone was there before. And sometimes rights were trampled in creating the modern landscapes we see around us. These peoples still are a part of our landscape now. This is not just history. There's a great website to go to explore how to acknowledge the past and the future. It's native-land.ca. It's a Canadian, it's kind of a Google Maps for Indigenous territory. And it shows you can take away the modern names for, this is with the area where Columbia and I are normally. And then we swoop over to Alaska, and here's that strait between Russia, Eurasia, and the United States. And we zoom into this area we're going to focus on today, Kotzebue, and the Native Village of Kotzebue. I hope you check out their website after we're done here today, kotzebueira.org. So we're going to start with a clip from the film, and we're going to meet the filmmaker, and then we'll get into the broader discussion. And for those on the microphones, if you can mute your mic while we're showing the film, that would be great. I can try to do that from my end, but then it gets a little complicated sometimes. So here, let me just get the film started so you can see the first couple of minutes, an introduction, a summary of the film.
Normally, in March and April, this is frozen solid all the way to the outside lead, another 20 mile out here. It's not supposed to be like this up here 30 miles north of the Arctic Circle. We got to recognize this as a threat to life on this planet.
The ice out here stops growing in the middle of winter.
This is going to be the fourth year where we have no ice in the ocean. That's unheard of. And there are times when I went out here to hunt, I'd go 65 miles out, straight out in the ocean and hunt. Now I can go 1.5 miles, 4 miles.
There's been abrupt and unexpected and unprecedented changes in the sea ice.
This past several years, we couldn't go out there because we didn't have stable landfast ice soon enough throughout the winter. The ice that we're standing on just kind of formed here January. It should have been frozen in October.
Literally, life is at stake. That I feel it's my responsibility to try and help with.
Hi, my name is Sarah Iñupiaq. I'm the documentary filmmaker for the Ikaaġvik Sikukun project. This project was based out of the remote rural community of Kotzebue, Alaska, between the Bering and Chukchi Seas, with research being conducted in Kotzebue Sound. I'd like to share with you how our collaborative project was led by an Indigenous advisory council in cooperation with scientists to understand how sea ice, the ocean, and marine mammals are changing in Kotzebue Sound. Recent years have seen dramatic losses of winter sea ice in the Bering and Chukchi Seas, accompanied by warmer and warmer ocean temperatures during the summer months. For most of our elders' lifetimes, Kotzebue Sound was completely covered by ice during the winter, providing an important platform for hunters and travelers. The ice cover has become less reliable in the 21st century, and during the years of the Ikaaġvik Sikukun project, most of Kotzebue Sound remained open water throughout each winter.
Ikaaġvik Nunakik Ingasut Kavlutit Iñupiaq Hoot. Itok Iñupiaq Hulit Tirat Nigakpom Tunganin Arctic Circle Room Kikirtami Takipluni Kikirtarum Imanganun Iñupiaq Ungalamlu Kivakngamlu Chakchisim. Angunarurut Tema Angunahuta Akalungnik Pukuhuta Naksarnahuta Akalungnik Tingmenik Nunam Angungoranginik Noreniglu.
And a great introduction to a remarkable project. And we're going to see some more clips from this in a few minutes. But first, let's, whoops. Sorry, we already saw that. Come on. Let's talk for just a couple of minutes here, a few minutes here now at the beginning with Sarah Betcher, who embedded and worked collaboratively so hard to bring these images both to the Indigenous Iñupiaq audience and to the wider world, film is released on YouTube. If you go to the links that related to this event today, you can watch the full film. And Sarah, congratulations, first of all. The thing that I'll note about this film that's so significant to me is it does what journalism really needs to do more, enable voices on the ground, essentially, rather than do what I did for much of my career at the New York Times. My 3 Arctic reporting trips were me kind of parachuting in, often with scientists, to areas of the Arctic, to Greenland, to the North Slope, near Dead Horse, to Svalbard in Europe. But there are great weaknesses to that. If you're coming in, taking pictures, taking notes, and going away with a story, it's very different than what you've accomplished here. So can you describe what it is that drives you to take this approach, and just talk a little bit about how this film came about?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Well, I first just wanted to thank the Ikaaġvik Sikukun team for being on the call today, and for everyone in the audience. We're really excited to talk about the Ikaaġvik Sikukun project and our results and how this project was structured. And Andy, I really liked your question of what drives my approach to story sharing with Indigenous communities. And that's very much my approach, is story sharing. So first, I've been interested in Indigenous traditions for more than 20 years. Interested in how people formulate their traditions in ancestral land, gathering plants for food and medicine, hunting, fishing, gathering products, gathering plants to make products, music, and dance. And so I feel like this knowledge is very important to gain a better understanding of how we can live more sustainably on this planet by thinking more locally, and how we can survive locally. And so I've been inspired to help preserve that knowledge, and a lot of that knowledge has been lost over generations. So I got my master's degree at University of Alaska Fairbanks in cross-cultural studies so that I could learn how to work collaboratively with tribes, with Indigenous communities, so that I could help share that knowledge with other people. So I do think it's important as an outsider to look for projects that are willing to fund a researcher to go in and spend quality time in a community, to really immerse in those communities. Like you were mentioning, Andy, a lot of reporters don't get those kinds of opportunities. And I think it's important so that as a researcher, you can gain an understanding of what's really important to that community and what that community values. So this film represents me having spent 8 years intermittently going to Kotzebue. In the beginning, it was really my second home, and really immersing in the community and gathering plants with people, going out on many hunting trips and learning what's really important. And so I see myself as more of a co-director and a facilitator to help share these stories. So I think when I'm working with Indigenous communities, it's important to see the willing participants as the directors of the film or of the report or of whatever's being published, and acknowledging that it's really the Indigenous people who know what's important to capture and record on camera, and to also be the ones to choose the voice that is spoken in the film. And so hopefully you can see that. Many of you have already seen the film or parts of the film. And so this project represents the ability for our project to really co-produce this project with Western scientists and Indigenous community members, so that we can gain a broader understanding of the landscape in Kotzebue Sound, how it's rapidly changing with climate change. And then one aspect that I really like to try to incorporate in projects, if I can, is to incorporate the local Indigenous language. And so for any of you who have already watched the film and you saw in the introduction, Lorena Williams is fluent in Iñupiaq, and it is an endangered language as well. And I find that it's important if you're able to include the Indigenous language, because that's another component, another way of knowing a landscape and transmitting that knowledge. So yeah, again, thank you for the team members for being on the call today. I hope you all enjoy the film, and I hope that everyone gains more understanding of how they can work collaboratively with Indigenous communities.
Fantastic. Well, I hope everyone out there is sharing this actively wherever you're watching. You can be sharing it right now with your friends and colleagues, neighbors on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and start the conversation going, because we'll spend the final half hour or so addressing questions and thoughts coming in from out there. We have very special guests. I set up some photographs ahead of time just in case the connections weren't great, but some of the connections are good. So you'll meet, hopefully, I think you're meeting Cyrus Harris, Bobby Schaefer. We'll find out in a minute. We were having a little trouble, even with one of our Columbia colleagues getting on, who was going to help Bobby get on. There's Alex Whiting, who's the environment program manager for the Native Village of Kotzebue. And he and I might have to go fishing someday, because that looks incredibly appealing. And Ross Schaefer Sr., who's one of the leaders, again, locally, and a great seal hunter. They're all here today. And John Goodwin. I'm not sure if John made it or not. We'll find out in a minute. So let's go back. Actually, do you know who is the intermediary for John? Is he on the call? Do we know today? Not sure.
I don't think John is on the call today.
Yeah. Well, you'll see him in another clip or two. Ross, I believe, is on the call. I see him there, and I'm going to change the screen now so you can meet him live. Let me just unmute here. Unmute. And we'll go back this way. Yeah, Ross, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I hear you fine. Thank you.
So I would love to hear from you and the others, and it's great to meet you indirectly here. Someday I'll get back up that way. I haven't been on an airplane in 2 years now, so it might be a while still yet. But when you think of this process, well, first of all, maybe you could convey a little bit about what life is like right now in Kotzebue. You've had this new wave of the pandemic has swept through. You face a host of challenges that just laying out the basic landscape of what you face would be great. Just a little bit of a picture of how things are there.
Well, it's been a cold winter, very early, starting in 1st of November. And the ice, I think, was formed all the way across to Cape Espenberg very early, which is unusual now. And no sooner we start talking about global warming, it got real cold up here. So it's kind of ironic that we're studying global warming when it's colder than hell, The other thing is we're struggling immensely with COVID. And like I told you earlier, I had a family get together to dig a grave for my daughter-in-law. And as it turned out, my son came from the mine, and grandson came in from the mine, and we all got infected with COVID. But all of us had our shots, and everything came out okay. We were exposed to it, and we're going to survive. I was really afraid that I might not survive because of my operation I had last June. But as it turned out, the shots that we received got us through with just a bad cold, a head cold. And so we're doing okay now. And it's been a real tough winter for all our people. We had a lot of deaths in this region, on the sad side. And it's been very difficult with the cold weather. We still haven't buried my daughter-in-law. We got the grave dug, and we're just waiting for the weather again. And the weather is minus 27 right now, and it has been minus 27, minus 20 most of the time for the last 5 days. So it's a tough winter, but we're glad to see the ice form all the way across, and that gives the seals a much greater chance to have their young and have them survive. So we're thankful for that part.
Yeah, one thing I've learned in writing about global warming now since 1988, a long half of my life, no one lives in the average climate. So the global warming is the warming of the average climate, and so we all live in very variable situations, and that was what this study was partially describing. Maybe you could trying to get into. Maybe you could talk about how you first met this batch of scientists and how this came together from your end. You know, what was the urgency, or how did that all come about?
Well, you know, prior to this last 2 years of cold weather, we've had very little ice out in our Chukchi Sea in the Kotzebue Sound, and it really concerned us because there were one year where we could not even hunt seal because when the ice finally did move in, it blocked off all the areas that we normally hunt, so I was not able to hunt seal in the water, and I usually hunt seal in the water from December on through to April, and that year I did not go out until April, and when it started to melt and the seals start basking in the sun, and that was one year that was the only year that I had not been able to hunt the whole winter. And so most of the time lately we would hunt about a mile to a mile and a half offshore, anywhere from Sadie Creek, which is right across, right near my camp, and all the way down the coast to Riley Wreck, which is 20 miles from Kotzebue. And we'll hunt about a mile to a mile and a half offshore. And that's really unusual for us. And normally you can drive anywhere out in the ocean on the whole most of the time, because we have the ice is constantly moving. The offshore ice breaks off about anywhere from 8 to 12 miles out from Kotzebue on the southwest side of us, and then it would periodically close up and then open up again after a huge offshore wind, and then we'd be out there hunting again. And so when you have open lead everywhere, you're very limited as to where you can go safely. And there was one time when my grandson and I were out, and we stopped about 20 feet from the ice edge, and I took out my tool to test the ice, and the second hit it went through, and I was my snow machine was on thin ice, very thin ice, and the only thing that held us up, I think, at the time was the sea. Sea ice is very flexible, and so I checked my grandson's snow machine because he had a heavier snow machine, and he was on thick ice because it didn't break through. So we just got out of there and went home. We didn't even hunt that time. So it's and seal is really important for a lot of our folks because we share a lot with a lot of communities as well as people in our area. Seal oil is really what keeps us warm and sustains our energy in the cold climates. And it's a real important food source for all of us.
Yeah, and we'll hear a little bit in a few minutes.
It's been difficult, not only middle of the winter, but when Sarah and I went out one day, it was very early in June, and the bearded seals had really no ice to bask on, and And so when we went out 15 minutes out of Kotzebue, we were right amongst the Uluks, right? About 7 miles out from Kotzebue. And that was extremely unusual. And that year, most of the bearded seals were caught along the shore fast ice, which was just a mile and a half offshore. It makes the water extremely dangerous because when the winds pick up, there's no protection. And when you look at our coastlines, we've had no protection for quite a few years, where the ice, once it forms and thickens up, that protects the beach from being eroded. And so there's a lot of variables in there that concern us a lot now and probably in the future. And I'm thinking that once this cold spell here that we're involved in, that in March, between March and April, it'll be very warm again. And that's what's been going on, is that winter is about 6 months a year, not like 9 months when we were younger. It's really a drastic change for us.
Well, this is an incredibly valuable close-up picture of what's going on. And let's show a clip here. We're going to get to some of your other friends from Kotzebue in a couple of minutes. This was a clip from the film. Yeah. There's some guy. Yeah. Some guy. He made a lot of headway. I think he made a lot of headlines.
I had the pleasure of meeting him.
Hold on.
I didn't get to talk with him much, but it was enjoyable to see him.
Well, hold on. Let's play this little clip here for a second from Sarah's film.
Who can we get to champion this climate change problem that we have all over the world? And I'd like to challenge President Obama to take that initiative. When he came up here, there was hope we would see something happening. I challenge him to get that hope going, get that study going, get the people motivated to make changes so that the world will not end soon.
President Obama was up here, and he came up here because of climate change.
When it comes to climate change, there is such a thing as being too late. The effects can be irreversible if we don't act. And that moment is almost here. And you know this better than anybody. I want you to know, as your president, I'm here to make sure that you get the support that you need.
President Obama, welcome back to look at the changes again. Anybody that can make a difference in public policy, make a difference with our congressmen saying, God, you got to recognize this as a threat to life on this planet.
Very powerful exchange, and it was good that he got there. Let's see what happens in the next couple of years. Alaska's delegation has been pretty, in Congress has been pretty progressive, I think, on climate. We'll save the politics for another day. There's a lot more work to do there. Cyrus, I wonder if maybe you could speak up a little bit about your, impression of how this unfolded, and what you see as the value in having this project, this research, kind of take shape the way it did.
Good morning. Yeah, this project, very helpful, and it's a great example of science that's based on Indigenous knowledge. Indigenous knowledge, it's been with us for time immemorial, understanding the ice, reading the conditions. And Ross, he has shared great information on this past couple of years. For instance, during the time we were having this project, we had no ice out here. But then after you all left, this past couple of years, we had tons of ice. So, there's several different ways of putting global warming, and another section of it is climate change. So it's been a real eye opener, from during the time we didn't have any land fast ice, and we had a lot of open water compared to what it is today in this past couple of years. So if I could remember right, it was last year or the other year was the first time I was even able to head outside of Sealing Point with snow machine to the lead ice. And that was a great feeling because it was in my younger days. We did that a lot. We're just unable to do it during the time we didn't have landfast ice. So be a little brief on this one here. Ross have explained it really well, and I would just be echoing his words on this past several years and the years that this project was going on. Great project, great way to share information, well put together, and I thank you for the invitation on this meeting here.
Well, it's good that you can participate. Hold on one second. So let's see. I know Alex Whiting, you're there. Alex, you're the environment program manager in Kotzebue, for the Native Village of Kotzebue, and you really are a crucial part of the interface between the Western researchers and the Indigenous community. Could you offer some words on how this played forward?
Good morning. Yeah, so when I started the environmental program Native Village of Kotzebue in 1997, and there was all kinds of different areas that the tribe was interested in investigating and cooperating with scientists who have their own special tools and techniques and knowledge to bring to bear. But from the very beginning, we always focused on what the tribe's priorities were, and made sure that the researchers, whatever their particular interest was in, prioritized in their research what the tribe's interest was, and we've always brought our people in to help shape the projects and to inform how the field work was carried out, and also how the results are interpreted, and how the relationships develop. So it's been a good cooperation between the people of the tribe and outside researchers, and this project was just an extension of that. Myself and Andy Mahoney at UAF had been trying to get, in particular, some ice research going, because as we're all aware, the climate is changing, our ice pack is changing, and we were unsuccessful for a few years in different proposals. But Andy connected with Chris Zappa at Columbia, and they were interested in developing a larger sort of ice research project, and the Moore Foundation was interested in a co-production project where Indigenous people would develop sort of the goals or the direction of the project. And so once we connected, then it sort of just everything came into place, and we just followed that pathway towards where we are today with 4 years of successful field work and a lot of published results, and moving the ball forward on how co-production research is done, and just being an example for the rest of the world of how Indigenous people and tribes and Western scientists can work together to produce exponential results that also match, reality. We're all trying to just describe versions of reality, and when you have Indigenous people and Western scientists working together, the results of that is a more accurate reflection of what is actually taking place in the world. So we continue to champion that approach, and we're real happy that we had a successful collaboration, and with our Indigenous advisors that we put together for this project, Ross and Cyrus and Bobby and John, they were really great at actively shaping the project and participating in all aspects of the field work and the results and everything else. So yeah, so we're real happy with the way it all turned out.
That's great. And I really hope we'll talk a little bit later in this broadcast about lessons here that can reverberate elsewhere, not just in the Arctic, but your colleagues at Columbia, Paige West is an anthropologist who's worked in New Guinea on trying to do the same kind of true co-production, where it's not just going to a place and saying, we're here to study seals, and thank you for helping us with our boats, that kind of thing, where it really is true. It's not just co-production of a project, but it's a relationship that gets built, and recognizing and respecting all those forms of knowledge. So, and John couldn't be with us today, but I think Bobby, let's see if we can get Bobby on. We were having some trouble with the audio. Ajit, I don't know if you're there. Is Bobby able to speak? We'll try. I'm not hearing. Anybody hearing?
No.
We can get back to him. And so let's go a little bit further into this journey we already saw that clip. Here we go. To another aspect of the relationship, Donna Hauser, who's here from the University of Alaska, is a marine mammologist who has become much more than that in recent years through this kind of work. Here's a clip from the film, and then we'll hear from Donna in a moment. Oh, sorry, I don't have it queued up the right way. Hold on one second. There's no producer behind the scenes here. It's just me. So hold on, we'll get it right. Stop sharing. Oh, maybe I did have it right. Share screen. So just take a second. We'll get there. Slides. Share. Okay, hopefully this will work now. All right. Clear that. Google advertisement stuff. And here we go.
I'm really grateful to have been part of this team and to become friends with a group of Indigenous leaders here in Kotzebue that I think will provide more opportunities for research. But in particular, there was one day that really stands out and I think exemplifies that. One day in the spring of 2019, we got to go out on the sea ice with Ross Schaefer when he was hunting nutchick, a ring seal. And that's a very unique thing that, most researchers certainly don't get to experience. And as a marine biologist who studies ring seals, it was so fascinating and exciting to be able to have a conversation with Ross and talk about what he was doing.
It's a place with a lot of current, so it's open all the time.
It is. It's a complicated system. So Donna, can you just describe a little bit your journey? What pulled you to study marine mammals and seals particularly, and then how that broadened out through this process?
Yeah, thanks. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So my journey, well, I grew up in Alaska and I've always felt a deep connection to Alaska's places, people, and wildlife. And I went away to school, and my training and my background really focused on understanding relationships of marine mammals and their environment. And most recently, that's really taken the form of examining how Arctic marine mammals respond to changes in sea ice cover. When I came back to Alaska, and I've started working at the University of Alaska Fairbanks and had the opportunity to join projects like this one, it's really been amazing and honestly truly transformational in how I want to do.
Sorry, that was a mistake on my part.
This has just been really a transformational opportunity in terms of how to do projects related to Arctic marine mammals going forward. I mean, Arctic marine mammals are part of an ecosystem that's involved Indigenous people since time immemorial, as Cyrus mentioned. And even though, you know, scientists haven't necessarily always included Indigenous people in those ecosystem perspectives in the past. And so I think what I've learned is that collaborative research that can include Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous perspectives and the collective experiences can be richer. As Alex mentioned, our results are stronger because we've done this collaborative process. And I also think they're more meaningful and directly relevant to the people that are most reliant and affected by the impacts of climate change and the impacts to these marine mammal species. So I think for me, it's these collaborative approaches are an opportunity for more inclusive science, more equitable distributions of power in terms of the research process. And I guess I'll just say that it's been some of the most exciting research that I've had the opportunity to be part of.
And a big part of this co-production concept is, even in terms of formulating hypotheses and the like, you're working with the community, right? Do you recall a moment when the traditional lens you would bring as a biologist to these questions got shifted a little bit because of some of that?
Oh, I think there's so many times. I think that what was so great about this project in terms of that co-production approach was that we had time, we had space to listen to each other and to build the relationships. And so it was really iterative. So, you know, we would, as scientists, get in the room with our elder advisors and talk about, you know, the themes, the research questions, and we'd write on the chalkboard. And you saw that, I think, in the film, right? It started with a blank whiteboard, and then we filled it together. And so then the elders would, you know, go back home or whatever, and we'd still keep talking about what, you know, our experience working with them. We'd refine those questions on the whiteboard, and then the elders would come back and we'd say, was this what you thought that is this right? And I think that interactive process really made it possible for us to work together and to really truly co-develop the research questions from my perspective.
That's pretty great. And Ross, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on having a scientist tag along for a hunt. It probably didn't change the way you hunted, but how did this feel from your?
No, it didn't change the way I hunt, but you know, it's always good to share our knowledge with others so that the world can see that we're still involved with our native way of life. And I'm always happy to have scientists along to see what we see out in the ocean and what we experience and how we look at the ice. I remember the first time I brought Sarah out there, the ice was very young. It was very thin, but I pointed out to them that we would go to the lead because the ice is all piled together to make it strong enough for us to drive on it. And then I had the pleasure of watching Sarah kayak out with my version of a modern kayak and see the pleasure in her face as she realized that this little kayak that I made was quite a little kayak. And so, you know, it's really good to share what we know and also learn from these folks a lot more about the world and have the world know that this is really happening to all of us, and it's not stopping. And that's why I asked to see if I could challenge President Obama to quit writing his books and focus on, hey, let's do something about what's happening to us. And I hope that he one day will see that this request has been made of him.
Well, I'll ping him for what that's worth. I'll send him a link and say, hey, maybe we can get you back into the conversation on Arctic change. Bobby, let's try one more time to see if we can get Bobby's voice here.
Go ahead, Bobby.
Is that
Bobby? Yeah. Go ahead. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yep. Bobby, just if you okay.
Okay, as long as you can hear me, I don't want to talk to nobody.
Yep. We hear you.
Yeah. Like, I think, just looking back, well, my involvement, of course, I've been involved with the work, since I was working for the borough, I sort of, and even before that, and there's been, because it was a reality, and I was really concerned about it because I along with my family and my especially my father, that always noticed the changes. He was in the back that from year to year, that's what he observed, and we didn't have nothing written down, but we always remembered what we observed so that we could adjust our lives towards happening. And so he was very conscious of what was going on, and I always mentioned it. And the curiosity came to life when the Canadians were complaining about acid rain, black rain, and out of the Great Lakes, and I wondered what they were talking about. So I decided to do a little research, and I found out that that what's happening there is not just happening there; it's happening all over. It's what the effects of the pollution coming out of the factories that was completely unchecked at the time, back in the 70s, was in fact affecting the atmosphere. But I was involved in that stuff for a long time. But then when this project came to be, I jumped at the chance of trying to observe what was happening with the climate from a scientific perspective, because I never saw that before. So I think that was probably the most beneficial part of the whole thing with listening to what and all the others were doing, and trying to figure out how it applied to my indigenous knowledge that I knew of the ice, and it became quite apparent that there was really close. I looked at it from a different perspective and understood why it was happening. But I think the most important thing, I think Ross had mentioned, was the ice and the lack of ice. But but my biggest concern, of course, was for the safety and health of the animals that are being affected by what's happening today. And just looking at what happened, my involvement since 2018, 2019, it's 2022 now, and there's a lot of more recent and better information coming from the scientific community that pretty much spells out that if we don't do something right now, the world is so. It's just one of those things that we put this together. We didn't have a lot of the scientific information and data that was coming out of what was happening because since 2018, you talk about massive wildfires worldwide. You talk about really severe weather events in one part of the planet.
That was great. Thank you for weighing in. And thank Ajit Subramaniam, who's one of the scientists on the project, for helping to shepherd you onto the broadcast. One of the limitations of StreamYard, unlike Zoom, is you can't phone in directly. So we just did a kind of a patchwork thing here. I'm going to show another clip and introduce another scientist in a second. Let me just get it queued up.
Sorry about that. Sorry, the call dropped just as we were winding up, but we heard you out to the last of what you were saying.
It was great. He was invaluable. And thank you, Ajit, for all that you're doing to carry this project forward. Hold on while I share screen again. And anyone can weigh in here too. If you're aching to say something during these transitional moments, this is a conversation. I'm not really in charge. One second, here we go. So as I said earlier, there's a lot of technology involved with this as well as tradition. And Chris Zappa, a scientist, ocean-focused, climate-focused scientist at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, is part of it as well. And here's a little clip from the film that gets at the sort of collaboration part of this project. Let's see if this works.
I also hope that people can follow the path that we've tried to create to demonstrate how scientists can work with Indigenous communities, not just to answer questions, but even to be discovering what questions they should be asking to start with. The definition of hypotheses is fundamental to the scientific method. And to date, the Indigenous voice has been missing from that part of the scientific method.
Pretty much every time we try to acknowledge our traditional knowledge would they claim it's invalid, basically because there's no documentation of what we know.
It took me a while to realize that this is what I'd been looking for. I've been working with Indigenous experts for a long time and often found it difficult to know how to really work their knowledge into my framework of understanding. And the answer seems obvious once you know it, but I think you've got to do it from the beginning. You can't plug it in halfway through or tack it onto the end. It sort of has to be in there from conception.
Like this project, I can see it's going to be real beneficial, basically, to the future in the future, because we're validating what our people knew.
It's a really good hook. This is the design that old Eskimos had.
Usually forums like that just about every year, from what I remember, after it freezes over.
Fantastic. And I hope these teasers stimulate everyone out there to watch the entire film, not in pieces, because each one leads to an interesting question or observation. And it's great that Andy Mahoney was featured here. I had interviewed him years and years ago on some reporting I had done on sea ice. And what he's described there, I've heard more and more scientists talk about that revelation that the sort of technical approach, the strict scientific approach, is not the end of the end game. Now my computer screen just died, so hold on. It's going to be interesting to. I think you're all still there. Here we go. Let's get back to this conversation part. So Chris Zappa, how are you doing, first of all? And are you down at Lamont? Where are you in the world?
I'm doing well, yes. And I am at Lamont right now.
Great. And so what's your takeaway here? Describe a little bit your science journey like Donna did. I assume you didn't come into the world thinking about some of these dimensions that have been revealed through this project.
Sure. First of all, Uvla Luatek to all my friends in Kotzebue. And definitely thank you to all the advisory council members, because this project is, as everyone's emphasized, is truly shaped by their participation. My science journey, ever since I was a kid, I loved the ocean. And funnily, I loved, while my friends loved going to the beach in the summertime, I was more of a wintertime, loved going out on the ice, playing pond hockey as soon as the ice froze, as the ice froze over. So I've always been drawn to this, the ocean and ice. And when I first went to grad school, I was given a choice. Looking back, I was given a choice of working on two projects. One was looking at open ocean waves, which is what I went and studied early in my career, or I could have worked on a project up in Alaska looking at leads in ice. And I chose waves first, but then my journey came back to working on sea ice eventually, and when I came to Lamont. I want to reframe the question a little bit
Sure.
to encompass the broader context of the important theme that we've been touching on. That none of this project would have been possible without our co-production of knowledge approach, from the research design to the measurements to the interpretation of results to this documentary, which we're celebrating today. And of course, this started with the definition of interesting questions to begin with, but also everything from installation of monitoring stations, determining the kind of ice travel was possible each day, to understanding how the conditions we were witnessing fit into the historical context of life in Kotzebue Sound. The whole project was built on a continuous conversation with our elders and advisory council, which is one of its great strengths, was that it was able to evolve in response to the ever-changing environmental conditions that we were observing real time on a daily basis. And we're continue to have conversations with the elders throughout. And one of the publications that we published with our advisory council of elders as co-authors is a direct reflection of this evolution. And this speaks to Donna's point of inclusivity of Indigenous voices in science, where after a year of carrying out of this co-design research, these questions, the elders were asking us to address the unprecedented diminished ice conditions we were witnessing that we've been talking about. Andy Mahoney was seeing evidence in the ice measurements for an under ice heat source. And we learned from the elders about the ways of life in Kotzebue to understand the importance of the river channel in food security, on ice safety, and teaching the persistence of the Iñupiaq cultural values. So we were able to put together a measurement, an additional measurement program that could sit at the intersection of those concerns, looking directly at both small-scale physics in a location that had specific implications for the community's traditional way of life, while presenting a broader context through the elders' expertise.
And here we are. Do you have a sense of where the science will go from here? This project, has ended officially. The film is just beginning to circulate, but what could you envision going forward? I know Ajit has some new work underway, again with a more grant related to blooms of algae in Arctic waters up there, hopefully including some of the similar processes. But what can kind of spread this model forward? And I want to ask that of each, also the Indigenous, the Kotzebue community too. What issues around you could benefit from more of this kind of science? Maybe Ross, I don't know if something comes to mind, the other challenges you face, whether it's, subsidence of the ground, permafrost, or as we said, algae blooms. Are there other issues where we can start to see more of this kind of collaboration?
Well, I think Bob would be the one to talk to, because he's the one that's been out in the ocean with the scientists looking at algae and the water temperatures about 40 miles out from Kotzebue. For me, I think we have to keep studying the mammals that live out in the ocean and start to try to understand the changes that they're going through to survive. Because we noticed since 1982 huge changes in our world that has impacted the migration of many of our larger mammals, and has impacted our ability to harvest these animals. And we need to start to understand what's going to happen in the near future if what we see is happening will continue to happen.
Right. Actually, one of the things that came out of this study was, or I know it was important that you were tracking not just the sea ice, but the snow conditions on top of the ice too, because those matter for seals as well. Maybe for the scientists here too, was there something about that came through that's new and interesting as a result of this work? Donna?
Yeah, you know, we had a couple of projects. One of those, we have one paper that was co-led by Alex and myself, where we looked at Ikaaġvik, or bearded seal hunting season, and how that's changed over time. And I think, as Ross and others have alluded to, you know, one of the outstanding questions I think from some of that work is about the health of seals and how that's changing and impacting accessibility and availability of those resources. And then, yeah, we also looked at snow on top of ice, and how the snowpack might be affecting ring seals. And so that's some work that's kind of ongoing. Actually, a graduate student from the University of Washington, Jessica Lindsay, is leading some of that work right now as part of her graduate program, and working on a paper. So we're still figuring out all of the details there, but the question really is about, so yeah, I see here we have a question about surface flooding of the ice. And I think Cyrus would be a really good person to make. I remember there's a clip in the film where Cyrus was standing at a ring seal lair that had flooded, and maybe Cyrus can talk a little bit about what's the importance of flooding at the surface of the ice underneath the snow. One of the things that we saw a lot of in 2018 and 2019. Maybe I'll cue you, Cyrus.
Thank you, Donna. I'll try to answer that question. But from my observation, in some areas where you have a lot of heavy snow, it causes some weight on the ice. So when the tide does come in, it kind of soaks up on top of that. But with the bay between here and Sissolik, the most parts that's going to be exposed of overflow is going to be the shallow areas, and the least amount of exposed overflow is going to be on the deeper waters or the channels. And that's happening somewhat midwinter. So that brings a great subject out to the water depths. Even during the summer, this past summer, we had more high water than usual. We had a lot of rain. So you know, there's a lot that happens that can happen with that. For instance, the lagoons of Cape Krusenstern, we rely heavily on that area, Iñupiaq, you know, to harvest a lot of whitefish. There were a lot of whitefish back there, but of course, with all the rain that flooded the whole lagoon, it burst open well before we were able to do our fall fishing. So we're lucky to get a handful before that happened. So yeah, water depths, tide changes, high water, a lot more rain than usual. I think that hopefully that answers it, but Ross might have something more to add on to that.
Maybe not. Oh yeah.
You want me to talk? Is that what you're saying?
Well, maybe a little more. Yeah. One thing that. Oh, sorry.
You know, the ocean is with the way it has been going, where we have ice only 1.5 miles out from the shore, doesn't provide much ice piles, where the snow also piles up really well for denning. But with the 1.5 miles of ice on the shore, that isn't happening. And so one of the things that I've noticed is that the dens are usually flooded out with each amount of high water that comes in. And the most important thing I think that I noticed is that in the old days, January would be the end of high water, because all the ice on the shores would be frozen, and so very little high water would occur. Nowadays, every time the tide comes in, we have high water everywhere out in this bay. And it has impacted not only the marine mammals, but also the fish. We have countless amounts of sheefish being forced into shallow waters and dying out in the sandbars, and also herring. And also migration of fish is really impacted. Like, for example, Cyrus was talking about the amount of fresh water that come into our bay, and our bay was impacted severely with extreme high water all summer and all fall. And that has a huge impact on the migration of fish that come into our bays. And in the fall, when they do come in and hit all this fresh water, it has a real severe impact on their health. Many of them don't survive. And therefore we see a lot of dead herring along the beaches. And last winter, when it got high water, we found a lot of herring had died under the ice and surfaced along the cracks where all the ravens were feeding. So we know that it is impacting the health of the fish in our area. It's real crucial for us to have a solid base for the denning of seals. In other words, we should have a good amount of snow, we should have ice piles, and we should have distance between the shore and the lead. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about the amount of red foxes that hunt seals toward spring when the babies come out. And the closer to shore that the seals have their dens, is less likely the seals will survive. There's probably a good part of this has helped the young ugruk to survive, because they're a lot bigger seal, and the fox doesn't bother the ugruk. But the baby seal is so small when they first come out in the den that they're easy prey for the red foxes, because they walk all over out in the ocean and look for seals. So there's a lot of impacts, and high water is a real problem after January for us and for the marine mammals that live in dens to try to survive.
Well, you're also describing a much richer ecosystem than many people understand is up there too. Red fox and the like. It's a wonderful, rich landscape, which means there's still a lot of learning to do. There's some really good questions that have come in. Yareth Rosen, who wrote a good story about this project for Arctic Today, says she's interested in the use of the film to spread the word. Can you, and here's the second part, discuss, Sarah, the audiences that will be reached? This is a different way to get the word out than the usual method of publishing a scientific paper and press release. It's kind of what I was saying earlier. She said, can this go into schools? The film can live in many different ways in many different places and communities.
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. And it's one that I'm not great at advertising my film, so I'm really excited that Andy is doing this today, because it makes all the difference to spread the word. And the best way, all of my films that I've published are on YouTube. They're free to watch. And the best place to find all them is to go to my website, farthestnorthfilms.com. And they're divided into categories of whatever people are interested in, language groups and regions of Alaska. And so people are welcome to show them in classrooms. I love if people chat with me about it, just so I know, and then let me know how it went. And sometimes my films are shown in college classrooms and there's curriculum around it, or I can go on as a guest speaker as well. Or if someone wants to embed one of these videos on their site, they can talk to me about that. Usually the answer is yes, if it's for educational purposes. So And then as far as conferences, my films show at conferences quite often, or film festivals. I'm not the best at reaching out to festivals for that, but if you do have a desire to show the film in your classroom, just let me know. Chris and I have been working together to try to get the film onto thumb drives, and I think we're still in the process of doing that. And so we can try to get the word out, and also feel free to send me your address or to any schools you recommend have a copy of the film. We're still generating a list of addresses. And right now the addresses that I have are the main outreach education facilities in Alaska, government agencies, but I'm happy to receive more addresses if you have them. I'd be thrilled to know that the film was shown in classrooms. And so, it's an hour and 20-minute film. Depending on the length of your class, you could watch it in a couple segments. There's also a film series that I produced that's on my website and on Ikaaġvik Sikukun website on YouTube, that if you don't have as much time, you could watch little topic-oriented videos as well. So I hope that answers your question. And again, thank you for asking that. And I hope other people who want the film shown can send me their address if they want it sent somewhere.
Hold on one second. I'm having a little trouble with my audio. For some reason, I suddenly can't hear you all, which is a little bit troubling. Give me 1 second. If you can you hear me okay? You hear me?
Yeah.
I'm going to put another question up here. And Sarah, maybe you could, until I can hear you again, maybe you
sure.
can
Yeah.
the question and get at the answer.
Sure, Lisa. Thanks for asking that question. Yeah, I have made quite a few other films in the Iñupiaq language. Actually, when I was still a student getting my master's degree, I worked as an intern for the Smithsonian Arctic Studies Center, and I worked with Lorena Williams, who is the narrator, the Iñupiaq narrator of the film. And so that was about 9 years ago, and I made about 6 short films that were looking at traditional pieces like mukluks and things like that. And so I've really enjoyed it. I don't speak the language, but I can listen to it well enough to put the words in the film. And so whenever I work with a film that's in an Indigenous language, I'll work with 2 to 5 other elders to, check on the spelling, things like that. The nice thing with Lorena is that she can spell and speak it wonderfully. She has also taught Iñupiaq at the college level, and so she was great at spelling it. And there was also a professor at UAF who helped, which is in the credits, Lawrence Capelin, who helped double check on the spelling. And as far as funding, there is funding available for things like that. And really, it wasn't a lot of extra funding to incorporate the Iñupiaq language. That was just something that I used my budget, my salary to fund that part of the project. Andy, can you hear us now?
This is a little weird. Sorry to cut you off, but I'm still not hearing you all. I know you're there. I want to have this show end the way we had hoped. So give me a second while I work on my audio issue. Donna and Cyrus, if you want to weigh in while I'm figuring this out, and Alex, just take your turns with this, kind of where do we go from here part, while I'm trying to figure out how to hear you again. I'm so sorry. Give me another minute and just speak amongst yourself. Maybe Donna, you could go.
Well, I guess maybe I'll jump in terms of this filmmaking aspect of the project. As a scientist, this was the first time I've ever had a filmmaker following me around on a project and having a camera in place, you know, at times when I wasn't expecting it. And so it was I think that was actually a really excellent opportunity to practice ways of speaking clearly and, you know, being able to share, you know, the scientific process as it was happening, and ultimately helped our collaboration for this project to make sure that we were all on level playing fields. So, you know, a profoundly different project, a very different thing to be followed around with the filmmaker as well. But I think it's really wonderful to be able to help tell the story of the Ikaaġvik project. And so, yeah, it's been, and I will say that I still think that the elder advisors are really the star of the show. So I don't know. It looks like, Andrew, maybe you've got another film clip queued up here. Or maybe it sounded like, I don't know, do we have Bobby back on the phone?
We do. Should.
So Ajit, maybe if you can help Bobby to talk a little bit, you know, earlier we were trying to talk about some of the next steps, like what other research is needed in this process? How could this process that we used in Ikaaġvik be helpful for other types of projects and research needs in Kotzebue?
Andy, you're going to bring Bobby back from backstage.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that.
So it looks like Andy's going to play. There is one more clip that we wanted to show, and this is kind of the last little segment of the film.
I don't want to interrupt, but I do want to show this closing clip. So I hope I'm not interrupting. I cannot hear you guys, but let's watch the closing, this last clip that Sarah so kindly offered for this special launch of this film and celebration of this project.
The research questions we developed reflect questions important to the community of Kotzebue and provide a holistic point of view. The Iñupiaq meaning for Ikaaġvik Sikukun, ice bridges, was our symbol to keep our focus on bridging the understanding between Western science ways of knowing and Indigenous ways of knowing. We hope that our research findings allow us to share with the world a holistic view of how climate change is rapidly impacting the sea ice environment of Kotzebue Sound.
I want to see my great-great-grandchildren. I want them to wake up to an earth that's livable. I want them to be Iñupiaq, and I want them to go out and enjoy everything I see every day when I'm out in the country, the animals that we take to survive on. I want them to be there too. Because if we don't do anything, there's going to be nothing out there. The oceans will die.
Hello.
And we'll be extinct.
Oh, Ross has been on the phone.
So thank you all for being here today. Everyone, for working really hard to come together via all of these technologies, which we're all still kind of struggling with. Even after I've done 220 of these shows, there are surprises.
The research
that still come up. And I just want to summarize by saying, again, this Ice Bridges project wouldn't have happened without the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation having the foresight and creativity to sort of flip the science research funding model in a fresh way, with a creative collaboration being the thing that was funded, not the outcome expected. That's a very rare and welcome new approach to funding science. And as you can see, there's plenty of potential for this to spread around. There are other folks studying this question of community-based participatory research with traditional indigenous communities across the Americas and around the world. Paige West, as I said earlier, in New Guinea. So let's keep at it and spread the word on social media. These were great stories. Yareth Rosen, local radio station, have done pieces, NPR, on this project. When we are done with this broadcast, wherever you are, you can do your part to be a story sharer by taking the link you've been watching on, which becomes an archived version, and sharing it right away with people everywhere. And let's keep building the conversation going forward. I apologize for my technological limitation this last 20 minutes or so. I am in rural Maine and not in my usual setup. It's snowing here now. It's about 3 degrees outside, which I guess is a lot warmer than it is in Kotzebue. I wish you all a good winter in the Northern Hemisphere. And let's work on this climate change issue together. We can do more of these conversations as needed to drive the work forward. And thank you again. This has been the launch of Ice Edge, the Ikaaġvik Sikukun story, filmed by Sarah Betcher. Total collaboration with the Native Village of Kotzebue, with researchers from Columbia University, from University of Alaska, Fairbanks, and onward. This is Andy Revkin, from the Columbia Climate School, and again, in this case, from rural Maine, signing off, but signing on so we can keep this moving forward. Thank you all for being here today, especially Cyrus and John, Ross, Bobby, Alex. Great to have you on board. And Donna. And we are trying to go off the air. Thanks again.